It's time to chill out and get ready for a mediocre Q&A live stream. If you're old enough, grab yourself your favorite adult beverage, and if you're not, stick with apple juice. Put your feet up and relax. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. And now let's cue up the intro music. Evening. How are you guys doing tonight? Hopefully you guys are doing well. I'm doing pretty good over here. Work is starting to pick up a little bit. I wouldn't say that we're slammed or anything like that, but we're heading in the right direction. Our restaurants here in Southern California just got the green light to open up indoor dining to about 25% capacity, and or 100 people or something like that. Max or whatever. So it's certainly not back to normal, but I don't know if we'll ever be back to normal. I think there's going to be a new normal that's going to come from all this craziness. So we will see. But, work has been picking up more and more. I think I've got, in the last week or so, I've got 2 or 3 no cooling calls in the dining room, which is like the first no cooling calls I've gotten in over a year almost. So it's getting better and better every single day. Hello to everybody that's in the chat. How are y'all doing? Hopefully you guys are doing well. I kind of wanted to start off this stream this week and talk a little bit about business ownership and covering something that I kind of wanted to talk about. I guess I kind of really said nothing there in a long sentence. Kind of went through the whole dictionary and really said nothing. But anyways, that's a whole nother conversation. So when it comes to business ownership, there's that point of which you start out as a one-man shop, you build your way up, you build the relationships with your customers, and then you got to make that step to hiring employees. And along with hiring employees, your business is inevitably going to change, okay? I mean, of course, everybody thinks that they want to maintain the business and keep doing it the same way. Even I struggle all the time to try to keep running this business as if I was the only service technician. And I mean, there comes a point in time when you're going to have to realize that you're not going to be able to run it the exact same way. And while you in my case, while I have really good employees, it's just not going to be the same. They're never going to have that line of communication, that line of concern, and the line of, the amount of that they worry about the customers and things like that. Like nobody's ever going to have that heart. I call it the owner's mindset kind of a thing. So with that being said comes, you having to do certain things within your business, or at least the way that I run my business, we have to do certain things. And where I'm going with this is, like, for instance, because this is a hot topic quite often on my channel and my comments, criticisms and different things like that, is, I stress all the time, like, hey, I want to try to use OEM parts as much as possible. And, or, I might be working in a video, working on a package unit, and I say, you know what, that's not the right condenser fan motor in that package unit. And while people in the chat or in the comments might say, well, what's wrong with the motor that was in there? Well, I won't ever change a part that doesn't need to be changed, first off, but I'm always looking for an excuse to make something OEM again, okay, to get it back to manufacturer spec within reason. And I attribute that to having employees. And what I mean by that is, the easier it is for employees to repair things, the less callbacks I'm potentially going to get. If I can take, some guesswork and or some tinkering or, having to make things work out of the picture and make it as cookie cutter as possible, I find that it's easiest when the employees go to diagnose something. Is it a bad fan motor? Yes. Go get the OEM motor. Then I don't have to worry about them tying the capacitor in the wrong place. Or, you kind of get where I'm going with that. And unfortunately, it's that thing, because I can remember, working on reach-in coolers for many years. I can remember, going to the supply house and just getting an off-the-shelf temperature controller and making it work, having to fine-tune it. A3261 was a Ronco air sensing temperature controller that I could think of, and it would replace a lot of aftermarket or a lot of OEM controls. But, putting that in the hands of employees, a business owner is going to run into a problem. What happens if the sensing bulb's too close to the evaporator coil? What happens if, he sets it just a hair too cold? All these different factors come into play. And then it potentially leads to callbacks and, mistakes, of which, of course, the employee, you want them to go back and learn from their mistakes and grow from it. But, it's that fine line of having to keep the customer happy. And so I find myself leaning more towards OEM parts and putting it back together the way that it is. And I say this phrase often, I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel. Certainly I could make equipment operate a lot better in certain situations, but, it came from the factory in a certain way. And on a very rare occasion, I might deviate from, an OEM setup or something like that. But, I try to keep things as easy as possible because it makes it that much easier when I send someone else to work on that equipment. Does that kind of make sense to you guys? I try to keep it that way, so that way it's easier for my guys to go out there. That way they don't have the potential of accidentally making a mistake or missing something obvious and it leading to a bigger problem. For instance, and there's nothing wrong with this, but it's just, people having to think outside the box, and sometimes they may not have the experience that, I may have or something when it comes to a specific restaurant that I've worked at for 15 years. I'm so familiar with it that when this problem happens, I know what it is. You send someone else in there and they may not know because they didn't experience it like I have in the past, So if I can make things as cookie cutter as possible, I find my life is a lot easier. So again, I get that question quite often from people, why am I always pushing to go OEM? Why am I always, trying to make things back to factory, because I'm trying to make it as easy as possible to troubleshoot. So that way it isn't difficult for the next guy, so hopefully that makes sense. I was just thinking about that before the show started. So let me see what's going on in the chat right now and see what we have here. Let's see. Yeah, I'm not seeing anything in here yet. Okay. Hello to everybody that's in here. Really appreciate you guys all making it in here. Have I ever used the ProPress tool? No, I've never used a ProPress, but I don't know if you know that ProPress is actually a brand name. I happen to have the Zoomlock Max press fittings from Sporlan, and that is similar to the ProPress, but it actually has a refrigeration-specific fitting. I have a video on that. If you just type Zoomlock Max in the YouTube search bar, Zoomlock Max, you'll come up with my video. It's a walking cooler retrofit with Zoomlock Max, I think is what the video was titled or something like that. So What parts would I not replace with OEM? Well, there's certain instances that I might be working on something. For instance, I can think of it right now. I'm working on a Manitowoc ice machine. It's a quiet cube machine, and the fan cycle switches fail all the time on those machines. So when it is out of warranty, when it's no longer under manufacturer's warranty, then I will go in with an aftermarket fan cycling control and put it in there, and then they'll never have a problem. Well, the odds are likely not going to have any more problems with that fan cycle switch. So it's things like that where, I know that there's a flaw in the way that it was designed, and I might fix that. But I try to stay as OEM as possible to make it easier for the tech after me to troubleshoot and, not have to run into so many issues. So Angel is asking me if I do work on any EMS systems. Not really. I've done, very little work on EMS systems. So, all right, let me see what else we got going on in here. Let's see. Andy is saying he gets my OEM philosophy, but is there not some value in getting the customer running in one trip? At what expense, though, is the thing. Like, I try to keep as many OEM parts. Okay, so I don't necessarily go working for new customers every day. Most of the customers that I work for, I've worked for a very long time, and or maybe not that location, but I service their equipment, and they majority of the time have the same equipment at their restaurants. So if I'm working on Delfield refrigerators, for instance, we stock a lot of Delfield refrigerator parts in our trucks. I have some Hvacr parts on my trucks. So I have a lot of the most common parts, and or supply houses are readily available. But on a regular, it is normal for me to go ahead and tell the customer we need to wait for parts and order them. And my customers know that that's just what it's going to take. In fact, I have customers that demand that I use only OEM parts, and they actually demand who I order them from to make sure that they're factory OEM authorized parts or whatever. So, most of my customers, I understand like, hey, I got a walk-in freezer that's down. That's critical. It needs to be running ASAP. So, of course, I'm not going to try to find some silly part. If I can make something else work, I'll do it. But I try as much as possible, especially when it comes to like reach-in coolers and things. And for instance, I'll give you the example. We're talking about OEM parts, everybody that's just coming in right now. So, for example, Delfield refrigerator, on the older style, they had a constant cut-in temperature controller that had a coil sensing bulb that was shoved in the evaporator coil. You could replace that with an aftermarket temperature controller, sure. But the constant cut-in coil sensing temperature controller has defrost built into it. So if you put an air sensing, for instance, a Ronco what did I say earlier? A3261, I think is the old number that I remember right. And that was an air sensing temperature controller. I could put that in that coil, but then it's not going to have self-defrosting built in. So potentially we might come back a couple weeks later because we have a frozen up coil. Because when we change that constant cut-in temperature controller, we took the defrost, the built-in defrost out because it was mounted in the evaporator coil. And I don't know if you guys understand the whole concept of a constant cut-in or a coil sensing temperature controller. The sensing bulb is shoved in the evaporator coil, and it's set up that it never turns back on. A constant cut-in means that it always turns back on at the same temperature. So no matter how much you turn the dial, it's always going to come back up to about 39 degrees, 40 degrees. And so it's self-defrosting in itself, right? Because if you crank the dial down and it brings the box, the temperature at which the temperature controller shuts off or stops the refrigeration, may come down to like 26 degrees, but it's not going to turn back on till the air inside the box gets up to 39 degrees, no matter how much you move the dial on it. So something like that, not understanding what that OEM control does, taking it out of the picture, putting in an air sensing control, sure, it might maintain temperature, but it's no longer going to have that built-in defrost of the constant cut-in control where it always turns back on at 39. Therefore, you're going to run into more freeze-up issues. I have some videos out there that I show working on like true coolers, true stand-up coolers, and people would shove in like a pen temperature controller in there, of which would work, but you would have to install a separate defrost clock too to make sure that you get defrost in the system, okay? So that's what I'm talking about. Like, I try to stay OEM as much as possible, but within reason. I mean, if it's something that the customer absolutely needs, I'm going to tell them like, hey, we need to order the factory parts, but I can get it going, but we have to come back out and put these parts in. If they don't want me to order the factory OEM parts, I'm going to document everything, and they're going to sign their life away. That way they're not calling me when it freezes up and bitching at me or something like that. So how do I cope with superseded parts that does require modification. Well, of course, I mean, you're going to run into some of those situations, but most of the superseded parts that I run into don't require much modification. I mean, unless it comes from the factory, like a true refrigerator. If you try to order for some styles the old school mechanical temperature controller, they're going to send you a retrofit kit that comes with a digital temperature controller and all the components to make it work. Well, that's easy because it comes with instructions and you just follow those to a T and it works perfect. But I mean, occasionally you do run into things. So again, I just try as much as possible to go OEM because I'm trying to make it easier for my service technicians and trying to limit the callbacks and that kind of stuff, okay? Because those callbacks drive me through the roof. They're nothing but a headache. And, you know, I don't know if people realize how bad a callback is. In the customer's eyes, at least the customers that I deal with, Here's a scenario that we run into, and this is something that I hate, okay? In the beginning, this was a feeling when I wasn't, you know, before I was an owner, right? This was a great feeling to be the service tech that a customer wanted to work on something, right? So you go out there, you communicate with the customer, you fix the equipment, you shake their hand, you know, they appreciate you, you talk for a few minutes after you leave, and then you go on your way, right? And then you send another service technician out there, and, you know, maybe he's not as confident on that particular piece of equipment, but he gets it fixed. You know, he may have to call someone, but then you go back another time and the customer said, man, you know, I really wish you could be my only person that services my restaurant because you seem to make me feel more confident, that kind of stuff, right? So now that I'm an owner, I actually hate that. I used to love it when a customer would tell me, like, I really appreciate you. It used to give me like a good feeling to know that they wanted me to be the service tech to come out and work on their equipment. But now I've got employees and I can't be the person that goes out to work on that equipment anymore. So I recently just had a conversation with the manager recently where my guys didn't do anything wrong. But again, kind of like how I started out, they don't have that communication that I have because I have the heart in it and the passion in it. And, you know, so when a customer says, man, I really only want you working on this from now on, I have to say, look, I have 3 other employees. I can't be the only person to work on this. You need to be okay with those guys coming out too. And I have to try to reassure my customers, look, I understand they may not be as comfortable working on it, but trust me, I'm on the other end of the phone with that employee, you know, walking them through it, telling them what they need to do. So I'm confident they're going to fix it right, but getting the customer to believe that is the struggle. Okay. And I've had customers that have told me they don't want certain service techs at their business anymore simply because the service tech didn't seem very confident, but he got it done and I only billed him accordingly. But the customer wants the whole package. They want the cheapest possible, the fastest possible, and they want you to, you know, they want to feel super comfortable about the person coming out there. They want the most knowledgeable person at the restaurant. Unfortunately, that's not practical. So again, going back to the whole being an owner, these are things that we have to work through all the time. You know, that phone call from a customer saying, hey, you know, I really appreciate what Bob, you know, did, but man, I just don't think I want him in my restaurant anymore because when you come in here, I feel much more comfortable. That is a gut-wrenching feeling to a business owner because they have lost confidence in that technician. And, you know, we recently just had a talk about this at the shop. Like, and again, nobody did anything wrong, but I'm just telling them like, hey, we're coming out of a crazy time right now. These restaurants' budgets are super tight. They don't have money to spend and they're going to expect the world for nothing. So we have to wow them, you know, coming into these restaurants. We have to make them feel comfortable, you know, and, you know, you're never going to win 100%, but these are just some of the struggles we go through on a daily. So, all right, let's see what else we got in here. Eric, let's see. It says, you love watching the vids. They are very educational to you. Your parents also like to watch them while you're watching. So, all right. I really appreciate it, bud. Thank you. What would I do if the equipment I'm working on is obsolete and cannot get parts for? You know, I'll do whatever I have to do. In that situation, we might have to make something aftermarket work, but I'm going to try my hardest to go OEM whenever possible first. So, have I ever worked on industrial refrigeration? No, I have not. Let me see what else. All right, so let's go ahead and get to my list of things to talk about. Everybody that's in here, do me a favor. If you guys have questions, please put it in caps lock. I'll try to get to them, okay? If I don't answer your question, just keep repeating it until myself or one of the moderators tells you to stop, okay? Do me a favor, guys. Smash the like button and encourage everybody new that comes in to smash the like button as they come in. I'd really, really appreciate it, okay? We've got 249 people watching right now and 104 likes, so please get that number up. please the algorithm. All right. As an employee, okay, and this is something that I mentioned in one of my videos, how do you know when to stop looking and or when to stop cleaning, when to stop repairing? And how do you know when, you know, you're spending too much time on a call or not enough time on a call? And this kind of came from something that I mentioned in my video. This was a question that someone asked me. You know, that is a struggle. And again, I'm a business owner, so I know how much time I can spend on my calls. I can regularly tell you that I encourage my employees to put more time on the call, meaning that I need you to pay more attention, look around, be thorough, that kind of stuff. Okay. So I'm constantly encouraging my guys to look bigger, kind of. Okay. With the customer's permission, of course. All right. Again, even in the customer's eyes, at least the customers that I deal with, we go out there to work on a walk-in, or we go out there to do a preventative maintenance, okay? We're just servicing the equipment, changing filters, checking things out. A couple weeks later, something breaks. I kid you not, the service call that I'm going to get is, you guys were just here doing the maintenance, and now my refrigerator's not working. The maintenance was just cleaning. Like, the odds of us ruining something on a maintenance are very slim, okay? Yeah, there's the occasional leaving it off or something like that, but this is the kind of stuff that we get on a regular. You know, so customers think that you're there doing a preventative maintenance, you know, maybe not even touching that particular piece of equipment, depending on who said what you were going to do on that maintenance. But the customer doesn't see it that way. The customer sees it as, you were just here and now this is not working. I literally just had a phone call or a conversation with one of my customers. There's a new manager and she's like, how come every time you guys come here, something else breaks? And it's like, no, nothing else broke. You know, we're doing the maintenance. We're doing our job. We're making a list. Or how come you come out and do the maintenance and you always have a list of broken things that we didn't even know were broken? It's like, because that's my job, you know? So again, I'm not trying to be rude or hostile, but I'm trying to educate the customer and trying to provide them with a value, you know? And sometimes on a management level, they don't understand that, when in fact I'm working for the corporate office, and the corporate office is totally fine with everything because they see restaurants every single day and they know what kind of repairs happen. But a on-site manager doesn't necessarily understand that, you know, repairs are normal, especially in high volume stores, you know. This particular manager that I was just talking with, we just had this discussion because she's like, look, she goes, you guys are constantly coming out here. And I go, well, define constantly. She goes, in the last 6 months, you guys have been here, you know, 4 times. And I go, okay, but on different equipment? Yeah, but it's still the same. Like, that's what she sees. But then I asked her something. I said, look, you guys are the busiest store in this particular company, right? And she goes, yes. And I said, okay. I said, when things were super busy before, you know, everything went to hell with the virus and all that crap, I said, we were getting, I'd say 6 to 8 service calls a month at this restaurant. Okay. And she goes, okay. And I go, now we're getting, you know, 6 to 8 service calls in a couple months. Okay. I go, so where's the variable there? And she goes, I don't understand. And I said, think about it. I said, you guys are dead slow right now. You're not abusing your equipment. The cooks aren't breaking it. Therefore, the service calls aren't there. I said, when things pick back up and the restaurant gets busy again, the service calls are going to go through the roof. So I said, again, where is that variable? The variable is your cooks. I said, I understand that you see me and you think I'm breaking it. But I said, how come I haven't been here over the last couple months? If it was me doing this, you know, you think that the service calls would be just as much. But I said, the variable is, as you guys slow down and you don't have a normal kitchen staff and you're not slammed and you're not busy, the service calls go down. Therefore, the variable is the kitchen staff. The kitchen staff is abusing the equipment. So sometimes you got to babysit these guys and grab them by the hand and explain things to them. And then sometimes you're never going to win, you know, sometimes they're never going to understand that. What is my policy on customers calling tech for service if they get their numbers? Well, first off, that's not acceptable. I've had that happen, and I tell my service technicians, do not give out your phone number. Only give out my phone number. You know, my phone number is the only one. I want the customers calling me. If they're calling to try to, sometimes they want to have someone troubleshoot something like, hey, can you tell me things to check before you come out? I want them to call me. So if they're calling my service techs, then, you know, usually my service tech tells me and I tell them, you need to stop accepting those calls and you need to have them call me. So yeah, I don't want my employees, because what happens if one of my employees tells the customer something incorrect and then the customer said, well, he told me to do it? You know, no, I'd rather that be deflected on me and let me be the person to try to walk the customer through those things. So Let's see what else we got. What's my experience or opinion with R12 to R417C conversions? I don't know that I've done R12 to R417C, but I mean any refrigerant conversions. First off, what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug my buddy Ralph. Okay, my buddy Ralph is always willing to talk to you guys about refrigerant-related questions. So I'm going to go ahead and give you his information right now. Ralph works for Honeywell Refrigerants. So I'm going to give you my spiel on retrofit refrigerants and alternative refrigerants and stuff like that. First and foremost, you never mix refrigerants. I don't care what the supply house counter guy told you. I don't care what the other service tech told you. There is not a single refrigerant out there that you are supposed to put or mix with another refrigerant. Okay. If someone told you that, they're lying and they're incorrect. Okay. Every refrigerant is a specific chemical mixture, and it's meant to be used on its own in a properly dehydrated environment, meaning that you need to evacuate the system down to 500, if not lower microns. Make sure there's no air, no leaks, no anything. Then you put the new refrigerant in. But before you make any conversions, whether it be R12 to 417C or whatever you're going to use, you always want to follow the installation instructions from the manufacturer. I encourage you to go to the manufacturer's website, read up on that particular refrigerant. Is there an oil change that happens? Is there a better oil that you need to use with whatever refrigerant you're going to use? And this goes for any flavors of refrigerant. If we're using an R22 alternative, an R12 alternative, any of those, you always want to follow the installation instructions. When it comes to R12 replacement refrigerants, okay, back in the day, 409A was my replacement refrigerant for R12, okay? 408A was my replacement refrigerant for R502. Those were the most common ones. And there was a lot of miscommunication, okay? There was not good education coming from the supply house is who we were looking at for education, because they were the ones selling us this refrigerant. Oh yeah, this works perfect. Just do this, just do that. Well, we weren't being given all the proper information. So you need to go to the manufacturer's websites and read up on what needs to be done. Understanding something. If you're going from R12 to a 400 series refrigerant, there might be some pressure differences there, okay? So understand that. With 409A from R12, we would have refrigerant issues, okay? Because the receivers weren't big enough to store the full charge, and we ran into issues. Commonly we thought that when you were, for instance, using 409A, that there's a misconception that on a refrigeration system, you would only put in 80% of the original charge. Well, that's not necessarily true, because on a refrigeration system that has an expansion valve, you need a clear sight glass, bottom line, for that expansion valve to work correctly. But the design of the system was not correct. So we would have to leave the sight glass flashing for it to even half-ass work okay, and for the compressor to not go off on overload. It wasn't that there was a problem with the refrigerant. It's that we weren't looking past what the supply house counter guys told us, and we weren't verifying that the components in the system were big enough, the liquid lines were big enough and that kind of stuff, to make sure that we could store the entire charge in the system. So on 409A systems, on some of them, if we would just go in there and take the R12 out, change the dryer, and put 409A in there, and clear the sight glass, our compressors would go off on thermal overload. They would, get too hot, and we'd have issues, especially when they were trying to pump down, and it was just a problem. But it was a system design issue. Again, we had it in our heads that, oh, this is a simple change out. Just take one refrigerant out, put the other one in, and call it a day. But that wasn't the truth, because there wasn't a lot of good educational materials out there. So you got to lean on the manufacturers and read their installation instructions. Do not trust what a counter guy at a supply house says. Okay, I've gotten bit way too many times by that. I'm not saying that counter guys at supply houses don't know what they're talking about, but you need to do the research yourself and do your due diligence to make sure, because guess what? If the supply house counter guy sells you the wrong compressor and you install it, whose fault is it? It's yours, because you installed it. If the supply house counter guy tells you to mix the refrigerants and something happens, it's your fault, not his. Okay, so you got to do your due diligence and look into it. What is 410A used in air conditioning systems? Puffle up against. You're saying your issue is to clear the sight glass, you was running right up against your high side limit. And again, because there was a design problem in the system, okay, if you were dealing with a refrigeration system with a receiver and a sight glass, there was likely a design problem in the system, and you needed to correct that. It's not just a simple drop one gas in for, call it a day. So are refrigerants such as R12 and R22 also banned in my country? No, R12 and R22 are not banned in my country. You cannot manufacture those refrigerants anymore. We can't make R12, but we can still use R12. We still have surplus R12. You can't make R22 and or import new R22 into the United States, but you're still allowed to use it. You're not going to get in trouble. I know other countries have bans and different things like that, but it's not the case here. So what's the rule for sizing line sets for walk-in equipment? How do you calculate the BTU rating? Steve, okay, this is kind of a loaded question, Steve, and I'm actually working on a video series doing just this, explaining how to size line sizes. We're going to go, quickly into it. But in a nutshell, what you're going to do is you're going to find out the total capacity of your system, okay? The easiest way to do this, let's just assume we have one evaporator and one condensing unit on the walk-in, okay? Got a condensing unit on the roof. You've got a single connection line size from the condensing unit to the evaporator, plain and simple. The condensing unit has a 7/8, 3/8 line set on the outlet of the condenser, and the evaporator has a 1/2 inch, 3/8 line set on the outlet of the evaporator. What's the line size that we're supposed to use? Do we use the 7/8 or the 1/2 inch or the 5/8 or whatever? It doesn't, okay, the line sizes on the evaporator and the condenser do not dictate what size lines you're supposed to use on the system. What you need to do is calculate the equivalent length of the line set. The equivalent length is the actual measured length of the line set with added calculations for the fitting loss, okay? So if you have a 90-degree elbow on a 7/8 inch 90, that might equal 3-4 feet of pipe, okay, because of the friction loss across it. So that adds to our total equivalent length. So it's not unheard of to have a line set that measures 70 feet in actual measured length, but the total equivalent length might be 125 feet because it has a crap ton of fittings and 90s and elbows and T's and different things like that, okay? So once we've calculated the total equivalent length, then we're going to find out the capacity of the equipment that we're using, okay? Because that refrigerant line needs to be able to carry the refrigerant at the proper velocity and maintain the pressure drop across that line set. We don't want it to create a pressure drop too big, so we don't want there to be, high pressure at one end and low pressure at the condensing unit, because that's going to lead to improper oil return and stuff like that. So once we calculate the capacity of the system, then we're going to take that total equivalent length. And it's kind of like in residential duct. What I'm going to do is actually open up a program that makes it super easy. But you can get out the old Copeland manuals and you can do friction loss calculations and you can calculate what size lines you need. The easiest way, guys, is go to Sporland's website and input the information. Once you input the information, go to their what do they call it? Virtual engineer. Sporland.com. There'll be a virtual engineer tab. Go to virtual engineer. You have to put in your email address. And then on the virtual engineer, it'll actually have line sizing calculations. And you just input a few of the numbers. Again, I'm going to be showing a video on this very soon where I'm showing this, but you input your BTUs, you input your total equivalent length, the refrigerant type, and then it's going to come up with a calculation as to what size lines you need. Now, to go even further with that, you might have to change your line sizes depending on if you have really high risers, okay? Let's say it's going up 6 stories, okay? That's not unheard of. You might need to reduce the line size to increase the velocity. There's different things you're going to have to do, okay? You add in multiple coils, then that's going to change a few things too, okay? So someone had actually just asked me, because they had some incorrect information, and there's nothing wrong with this, okay? We all learn all the time. Even I am learning every single day. So if I say something that doesn't make sense to you or makes you think that you've been doing it wrong for a long time, just do some research. And it doesn't mean you're a bad person, okay? So someone had asked me, where's this question that I had here? Let me find it. And it goes with line sizing right now. Where's my question? There we go. I don't have the name, but he was asking about a common suction line, and he's saying, hey, I had 2 evaporator coils on my video where I did a new line set, just this last video, right? And he said, hey, I was always told, because he said that the lengths were different on my lines. So one evaporator was longer, one evaporator was smaller. I think he was confused on his question because he was asking me, saying that he thought both evaporator lines need to be the exact same length. I think he was referring to the line size, but that's incorrect in both, okay? So it depends on the capacity of the evaporator. If you have a 14,000 BTU evaporator and a 9,000 BTU evaporator, they're going to have different line sizes more than likely, okay? Because the refrigerant lines are sized to carry the refrigerant through it at the proper velocity to maintain the proper suction gas return to the compressor, that kind of stuff. Okay, so it's not unheard of to have different line sizes go into different evaporators because of different capacities or something like that. Okay, so hopefully I didn't butcher that, and that kind of answers his question. Let me see what else we got in the chat right now. Yeah, virtual engineer is where you're going to go. And Sporland's virtual engineers, there's another great thing about virtual engineer is that you can also, it'll help you to size expansion valves, liquid line dryers. It does all that stuff for you, okay? And it really takes the thought process out of it. You just got to plug in a few numbers and call it a day. And again, I am working on a video series, guys. There's no big rush on this one because I'm just taking my time, you know, working out the kinks and stuff. But what I'm going to be doing is a walk-in cooler equipment replacement from the load calculation, where we're showing the equipment, we're doing the load calculation, we're determining what size evaporators we need, what size condensing unit we need, we're determining the expansion valves, the liquid line solenoid valves, we're determining the line sizes, and we're going to put the entire system together, and I'm going to take you guys through it step by step on the video, trying not to bore the heck out of you guys, but trying to dumb down the process, because there's a lot of engineer speak and technical terms that even sometimes when I look at some of these things, I'm like, what the heck does that mean? Like, I don't know what that is, you know? I just want to make it simple. So I'm trying to dumb down the process so that way it's easy for me to understand. And, you know, I have resources available to me. Like, for instance, my buddy Ralph, Dallas fan in here, you know, I'm going to be picking his brain about a few questions because we're going to be using R448A refrigerant, right? So I'm going to pick his brain a little bit. So because I have access to Ralph, and well, you guys do too, but I mean, you know, some people just don't know the contacts that I can just reach out to. I'm reaching out to Sporland, to Russell, you know, and we're getting on conference calls with engineers and all this stuff. And I'm trying to really make it simple. So soon, okay? I'd say next couple weeks or so, this video series should be coming out. So, all right, let's get through the rest of this. So, had two videos this last week. They lost power in the middle of the repair, and the thermostat is missing and it's cold, okay? The two questions on both of those videos, the most common question. The first one, they lost power in the middle of the repair. How come I didn't use the NAVAC battery-operated vacuum pump? I have it, okay? But I had no power. I had to charge the system too. So that's why I got the generator. I had to evacuate the system, and then I had to charge the system with the recovery machine. I had to push the gas back into the system, you know, because I wanted to walk away and not have to come back. Now, at the end of the call, you guys saw that the power turned back on, but I have the NAVAC battery-operated 2 CFM vacuum pump, but it's not going to pull down a walk-in cooler with one battery. You're going to need multiple batteries, and I'm still using the big hoses, but to get it down to the proper evacuation, you got to have multiple batteries, and I would rather use a bigger pump in that situation, okay? And then on the one that the thermostat is missing, did I ever put the thermostat back? Okay, first off, it wasn't a thermostat. It was literally a tablet mounted on the wall that had a custom program in it that just showed their interface basically for the internet thermostats. And no, I did not put the tablet back on the wall, the thing that was missing that the customer thought was their thermostat, because they have an audio video company that comes out and they have a custom, like the whole custom mount for that thing. They had it like framed out with chair rail, like a picture frame kind of a thing. And I'm not getting involved in that kind of crap. So the whole tablet fell off the wall. I just told the customer to get the audio video company back out. They'll install it, they'll program it and set it all up. That's not my thing. So, what's my biggest pet peeve on walk-in equipment? My biggest pet peeve, that's a hard one, bud. I mean, I can't handle when people leave crap on the roof, their trash and stuff like that. You know, and then service technicians not being thorough when they're defrosting walk-in cooler equipment. Take out the fan motors, take out the fan blades, be thorough, defrost the entire thing. That would be a pet peeve of mine, I guess. Chris Norris, thank you so very much for that super chat, man. That is amazing. I really do appreciate it. You guys that do that, it's awesome. You know, I don't need the super chats, but it is super generous when you guys choose to do them. So thank you so very much. Okay. While we're talking about that, if you guys do want to support the videos, you know, the easiest thing is just watch the videos on YouTube. That's the easiest way to support it. Watch the videos. If you want to go further, You can support via super chats, or you can go to my website, hvacrvideos.com. I got merch available. By the way, the large hats on the website are out of stock, but I'm already gotten that process rolling. So I'd say in the next week or two, I'm hoping, or 3 weeks at the most, I would say, we're going to have a whole new stock of hats. I just ordered another 100. So they'll be coming in. But we still got plenty of sweatshirts, hoodies. Sweatshirts and hoodies are the same thing, but they're zip up hoodies. We got plenty of those, shirts, hats, beanies, all that stuff. Okay. You can also support via Patreon, YouTube channel membership, all that good stuff. Okay. Let me see what else we got in here. Have I ever seen residential AC compressors used on walk-in coolers? Kevin. Yeah, I have. Yeah, not so much anymore these days, but I have in the past. I've seen residential 5-ton air conditioning systems just on the roof running walk-in equipment and stuff like that. People added receivers and time clocks and all that fancy stuff, pressure controls. Yep, seen it many times. All right, when is the review coming for the Milwaukee heated jacket? I don't know. That might be one of the other guys. I bet you Adam or Joe might even have that Milwaukee heated jacket. Here in California, I don't think I really have the need for the heated jacket. I might buy the heated vest because they actually have just a vest that you can buy. That might be better because I wear long sleeve shirts anyways. Let me see what else we got in here. Okay, so I'm going to get back to my list. Danny was asking me about my oxygen or oxyacetylene torch setup, and he was asking which package to buy as far as an oxyacetylene setup, and he was questioning whether or not I use flame arresters on my oxyacetylene setup. Okay, yes, I do use flame arresters. I do not have one specific oxyacetylene setup that I tell everybody to buy or anything like that, because I'm not satisfied with any of them out there. Okay, that's one thing I've always been bugged about, is every manufacturer has an oxyacetylene, whether you go with insert name a brand here, Hvacr, whatever, Uniweld, all these different brands. I've never been totally satisfied with the caddy, the cage, the components. I don't know. It just doesn't seem very, they don't seem to have the technician in mind when they design these things. So I don't really have one that I specifically use, but yes, I do use flame arresters. They usually come on the kits already. You just put them in the hose line and they work just fine. So, okay. So I answered that question. So someone had asked me about outside air dampers when it comes to RTU units and building balance. And he was kind of asking me, how do I determine how much to open the outdoor air dampers? And then he was also asking me, he's working on a Linux package unit and he was having a hard time disabling the free cooling, meaning that if he would open up the outside air dampers, then when it would get cool outside, he noticed that they would open more. So when it comes to the Linux package units, it's going to be in the unit settings itself. If you have a new Prodigy unit, you're going to need to get into the unit ID configuration. I'm not going to instruct people how to do that. You got to read the manual because you can set them up for manual outside air dampers. You can do that kind of stuff. You can set them up to turn off free cooling. If you're using on the old Energence units that had like the M18 or previous circuit boards or M19 boards, it was just a dip switch setting that you could change to turn off free cooling. But as far as how to set the outside air dampers and how to know it, you're going to need to do a building air balance. When you do a building air balance, you're going to, it's very rare that you actually come up on these plans, but in an air balance, they're going to determine, usually it's determined on a set of engineered plans. You need the dampers set to this position, the exhaust fans moving this much air, and an air balance tech should be able to come in and just look at those plans and then adjust everything accordingly and then measure and verify. Now, as a field technician, I'm not going to have those plans. So there's some rules of thumb that I'm going to use, being very cautious not to mess up any engineered systems. Worst case scenario, I can't get my hands on plans. The building's out of whack. You make sure everything's operating, everything's clean, outdoor air dampers are clean, functioning, and then we're going to set the exhaust fans and then balance the building out by feeling the airflow. You can use manometers, but it's a tricky thing doing air balances. Again, I'm not a certified air balance person, okay? I just know how to kind of wing it. But you're going to pay attention to the positive, negative air pressure in the building and try to, in my area, typically try to get as close as possible to a slightly positive building. That's how we typically run our restaurants here, is ever so slightly positive. But I mean, it's not really something I can completely walk you through over here. It can be tricky, and I would encourage people not to mess with air balance because you can really screw some building issues up. So be very cautious about starting tweaking on things. Vito oxyacetylene torch bag. That's an interesting one. Yeah, I've always been an oxyacetylene person. So am I going to review the Milwaukee crimping tool? If you guys have things that you want us to review, if you're curious about, you know, the tools channel, first off, if you guys don't already know, we have a new tools channel called HVACR Tools. Myself and the Overtime guys are running this channel together. I'm posting a link right now in the show or in the chat. You guys please subscribe to that channel. Give us some watch time on there. Help the channel to grow. If you guys have suggestions or things you want us to cover on that, I have an email address, and the email address is tools@hvacrvideos.com. tools@hvacrvideos.com. All you need to do is send an email to tools@hvacrvideos.com and give us your suggestions of things you think we should cover or talk about, and we'll go over it and see what we can do. So Tristan had asked me about trade school. He wants to get certified in HVAC, but he wants to know if he necessarily has to go to trade school. Tristan, it really depends on the location you're in. Here in California, we have no licensing requirements to be a service technician other than getting your federally mandated EPA Section 608 certification that says you know how to handle refrigerants and when you're supposed to recover the refrigerants and all that stuff, okay? So in California, other than that, that's the only thing you need to be an HVAC service technician. You do not need state mandated licenses or anything like that. Now, if you want to open a business, yes, you have to have so many years in the trade and pass a state contractor's license. But other states have more stringent requirements where you have to have, or other countries, Canada and different things like that, you have to have certain certifications, okay? So it really depends on where you're at. So in California, you could certainly find a company that's willing to train you, and you would never have to set a day in school if they require that, right? They can teach you everything they want to teach you, and you can continue to work for the rest of your life in California, okay? But in your location, Tristan, I don't know where you're at. It really depends on the place you're in. So what I would suggest is if you're interested in getting into the trade, call a local refrigeration and air conditioning company and just pick their brain. Say, hey, I'm interested. What would I have to do? What are your requirements? What are the legal requirements? And they would probably fill you in, I'm sure. So let me get to the list of things here. Yeah. All right. Belimo makes a universal kit, or at least they used to. Send it whatever zeroed in your flow. Oh, okay. You're having another conversation. Have you seen a rooftop package unit that uses a combustion chamber for the furnace? Andrew, are you talking about a Trane package unit that has a combustion chamber? That's what it sounds like to me. I don't know if that's what you mean, but Trane package units, they use a giant combustion chamber as their heat exchanger. If that, I don't know what you mean by that, bud. Do they make single-phase walk-in cooler equipment? Yes, they do. Am I still set on DeWalt tools, or am I starting to like Milwaukee? I have a mixed bag of DeWalt and Milwaukee stuff. I think I've been actually using more Milwaukee stuff lately than DeWalt, so. But I'm not going to get rid of my DeWalt stuff. I'm going to use it until it breaks. But I'm not set on one brand, but I do like the idea of just having one set of batteries in the truck, so. What is MO99 used for? MO99 is an R22 retrofit refrigerant. How often do you go through old Honeywell thermostats? I don't get very old ones anymore. I have the newer ones right now. We're on a phase changing out the Vision Pro thermostats right now. Is the series that they're getting rid of at the moment. Let me see what else. Everyone, please. Yeah, please, guys, smash the like button. We got 314 people in here, 176 likes. Please get that number up. It would really help me out. I really appreciate it, okay? Let me see what else. Troy had mentioned that he thought there was... okay, so in one of my videos, Troy was watching, and he was saying... actually, my recent video, he was saying that, I mentioned that the belt was worn kind of funny, and the pulley was bad because I stuck my finger in the pulley and I could feel the wall of the pulley or sheave. And he was saying there's nothing wrong with the pulley. He's saying just change the belt and adjust the pulley accordingly so the belt sits in the pulley correctly. And that's incorrect. Okay. So first and foremost, let's talk about this. So pulley, sheave, I don't know what you call them. I call it an adjustable motor pulley. Okay. And then I call it a drive pulley. Some people call the motor pulley a sheave. Some people, I don't know. Semantics, guys, okay? So the motor pulley in my case is typically adjustable. I get it. People tell me all the time in the chat, I should put in fixed groove pulleys that are not adjustable. Yes, that sounds great, but that's just not what happens out in the real world, okay? In the real world, in restaurants and most light commercial refrigeration and air conditioning equipment, if it has an adjustable pulley on it, we leave the adjustable pulley on. I don't think I've ever seen someone go put fixed pulleys on stuff, okay? Sounds great, but it doesn't happen very often, okay? Second thing, if the customer doesn't do routine preventative maintenance, in my opinion, and they run loose belts on their equipment all the time, you're going to have a lot of failed adjustable motor pulleys. In my opinion, in my experience, and just my observation, loose belts ruin pulleys, okay? I don't have any scientific evidence to prove that. It's just from experience. I noticed that if we have loose belts all the time, we're going to have bad pulleys, okay? What I have right here is a pulley gauge tool. This is from Browning. I think there's probably a link in the show notes of this video. I don't have a part number for this, but I've shown this in videos all the time, okay? Personally, I don't use this very much, but this is great for new guys that don't understand what a pulley or a sheave should look like. Okay, this little tool right here fits into a V pulley like that, okay? And what you do is you look for this flat edge right here to stay flat on the sidewall of a pulley, or whatever you want to call it, sheave. A pulley shape should look like this, okay? That should be the shape of a pulley. Doesn't matter where it's adjusted, it should look like that. The walls should be straight. Therefore, if you use this pulley gauge and you put it right on the corner, it should be straight. And there should not be a big gap. A pulley should not look... Hold on, let me draw this. And I know this is making for a great video. A pulley should not look like this. Okay? Should not look like that. It should not be misshaped. It should be straight down the sidewalls. This is going to happen a lot when the pulley gets worn out and when the belt's been riding in it loose. You never, ever adjust motor pulleys, okay, to try to fix a belt that's being stuck in the pulley, because it's worn out or anything like that, right? Motor pulleys need to be replaced if they're worn out. So this gauge right here is going to help a new guy get an understanding of when a pulley would be good and bad. But even with this gauge, in a perfect world, every time a pulley is not that perfect V shape anymore, it should be replaced. But that's not always practical, okay? Because sometimes they get worn out quicker and you can get a little more life out of them. You just got to kind of watch it. When you start to notice that belts are getting stuck in the pulleys, that's when it's time to replace them for sure, okay? So you don't want to be adjusting a pulley to try to make a belt fit in it better. Now, there's some truth in that statement, because if a pulley is opened up way too much, then yes, the belt's not going to ride in it correctly. But if it's sized correctly and everything, you shouldn't be adjusting a pulley to tighten a belt, to loosen a belt, or anything like that, okay? The next thing that people ask me is, when you're changing a belt, do you roll the belt on? Leave the pulleys where they are, leave the motor bracket where it is, and roll the belt on, okay? I'm not going to lie and tell you I don't roll belts on pulleys all the time, because I do, okay? But you got to be careful, all right? You're not supposed to roll a belt on a pulley. What you're supposed to do is loosen up the motor, push the motor in, put the belt on there, pull the motor back, and tension it appropriately using a tension gauge, okay? Honestly, I never, ever use this. I'm not going to say it's not a valuable tool, but I don't ever use it, okay? I'm probably an old school guy that's being stubborn right now when I tell you that I can just look at a pulley and feel it and look at a belt and tell you when it's tight enough. I realize there's probably some incorrect information in me saying that, but I just usually look at a belt, feel it, it's too tight or it's not tight enough, and adjust it accordingly, okay? But in a perfect world, you should be never rolling a belt onto a pulley, but I'm not going to say that I don't do it. You just have to be careful. When you roll a belt on a pulley, what you do is you stretch out the belt, and it's going to lead to problems, okay? So you got to be cautious about that. Let me go ahead and cross that one off the list. And let's see what else we got in here. What are my thoughts on butane mini torches for brazing? I don't think you're going to be able to braze anything with a butane mini torch. It doesn't get hot enough. All right. Are worn pulleys a more recent issue, poor cast, or has it always been an issue? Neil H, they've always been an issue, but in my experience, they've always been an issue. What are my thoughts? I already answered that one. Any favorite electrically insulated tools like Ideal or Weehaw? I've never used Ideal and or Weehaw tools. I have a few Klein insulated screwdrivers, and that's about it. I have not been introduced into the Weehaw thing as of yet. So let me see what else. What we're told that one on location, one of the 3-in-1 country. I don't know what that is. Okay. What's the best HVAC brand on the commercial refrigeration side, in my opinion? I don't know. You know, that's a hard thing to say. Every manufacturer has good and bad things. I like Russell condensing units on the roof. Russell evaporators are okay. You know, I really don't have a preference though. What happened with my Testo? I still have my Testo manifold, but it's going to become my backup manifold. I bought that as just kind of a, to do a tool video on. It's not my favorite manifold in the world. I really like my Field Piece S-Man. So, let me go ahead and cross that one off the list. And, so when I make a video and I find something that a previous company did before me that was kind of shady or something like that, how come I don't mention the company's name? I say this all the time, but the comments lately have been blowing up about this. People telling me that I'm doing a disservice to the industry by not calling out the other company. People saying that I need to help customers by naming these companies on YouTube so that they don't potentially or accidentally use those companies. Guys, I'm not going to get a defamation lawsuit against me because I named my competitor and said that I thought they did this wrong when I have no proof that they did it. I live in a very litigious state. Okay. California, they're just going to sue the hell out of me. So I'm not even going to go in that area. My customers know, and you know, and that's all that it is. I'm not going to name companies on a YouTube channel that has a huge viewing and stuff like that. I'm just not going to do it because I'm going to get my ass sued. Yeah, sure. I might prevent you from using, or, you know, some customer from using them because they saw my video, but then that company might turn around and sue me. So nah, not even going to go there. I don't need to talk crap. They speak for themselves. Can I use MAP gas to braze line sets? I mean, if it's small enough lines, but I'd say once you start getting past 1/2 inch, you're going to have a hard time getting that solder to melt and flow correctly. So what are the must-have tools for a beginning tech? Not really something I'm going to do on the live stream, but send me an email, bud, to tools@hvacrvideos.com, and maybe we'll do that on as a video. See what else we got in here. Hello to everybody that's in here. All right. So I kind of already answered that one, but I'll answer this a little bit more. I kind of already went into this, but why don't I repair more parts? Like, you know, when I have a motor that has bad bearings in it, why don't I pull the motor apart and change the bearings? You know, when I have a bad, I'm trying to think what else I could potentially repair, but I get that question all the time. Like, hey, how come you don't pull that thing apart and try to change the bearings or something like that? It's all about time, guys, time and money. And so let's say that I have a condenser fan motor that's failing, it's locking up, and I pull the whole thing apart. I managed to find the bearings somewhere, put them in the motor and put it back together. And, you know, the motor had been running really hot for a long time and there was other damage. It's not worth it for me to try to repair bearings in a motor and waste, you know, 3-4 hours of my time when I can probably put in a new motor for cheaper and be done with it. Okay. So it's really about time and keeping the customer happy. It's very rare that we have stuff rebuilt. Every once in a blue moon. I mean, in the past, we used to have compressors rebuilt when we were doing a lot of K-body compressors, semi-hermetics and stuff like that. We don't run into that anymore. Customers don't want that. They just want cheap, fast, and get the hell out of here. So, you know, in my recent video where I said they lost power during the middle of the repair, a lot of people said, hey, how come we don't put phase monitors on that equipment? Guys, this has been a pet peeve of mine since day one. Since I started this channel, I've given my opinion about our poor electrical grid here in California and how the customers have started, you know, having VFDs on all their equipment and circuit board failures and different things like that. And I've always said that one of the things these restaurants could certainly do is put proper power conditioning, power monitoring on this equipment, so that way they don't have phase loss and low voltage, and the equipment would be turned off by the phase monitors, right? But my customers don't want this stuff. The return on investment just isn't there for the customers to consider putting phase monitors and different things like that on their equipment. So I don't. It's really just down to the customers and what they want. I think the customers should have it installed on their main electrical panels coming into the building, and then just protect everything. That way they don't have issues with it. But, you know, that's on them. That's an electrician's thing, not really mine. Sometimes, oh, this is a good one too. So oftentimes you guys will see in my video, someone was commenting on an old video where it's like, dude, you could have just changed a whole condensing unit for a lot cheaper than all the parts that I put in that equipment. Well, you have to remember something. When the customer calls me because their walk-in cooler or beer walk-in or something is down, they didn't plan typically for that equipment to go bad. It typically was an emergency repair, and it needs to be fixed ASAP. So yeah, in a perfect world, you know, it'd be better if the customer would go through and replace the equipment as it's aging, you know, and not get critical failures and different things like that. But unfortunately, when stuff goes down, you got to do what you got to do to get it going. And oftentimes the customer, yes, they will end up spending more money in the long run than if they would have just preventatively replaced that equipment because it was getting very old. Okay. So yeah, there's many times where I end up having to change a receiver, a compressor, contactors, evaporator, fan, motor, temperature controller, all these parts. And it's like, damn, we could have just bought a condensing unit and evaporator and spent an extra $1,000 and they would have had a whole new system. Yeah. But they needed it fixed ASAP. So, you know, sometimes we just got to do what we got to do to get it going on. So I already answered that question. When it comes to working on equipment, my policy, my employees know this policy, and I try to do this all the time, is when we're changing fuses, we always leave extra fuses for the next guy. All right. So in my recent video, I showed where I was working on the thermostat was missing. I found multiple fuses that were the incorrect fuses for the circuit boards. I think on one unit I had a 15 amp where it was supposed to be a 5, and on another unit I had a 10 amp where it was supposed to be a 5. So when we were there, we replaced those and we left spare fuses. Okay. Same thing with disconnect switches. Whenever I can, I always leave spare fuses for the next guy, because I hope that the next guy is going to be me. But that way, if someone runs out of things, you know, hey, there's extra fuses right here. Just leave a couple control fuses up there. So I always try to do that more. How do I gain more customers for service? Willie Bryant asked. That is the golden question, bud. For me, it's just been word of mouth and my reputation that, you know, has kept the customers coming to me. I don't get a lot of new customers. I just try to keep customers for a long time, essentially. And I work for, you know, a lot of restaurant chains. So when one manager leaves that chain, he goes to another manager. So I guess the way is just to get your foot in the door. So, you know, if you need your foot in the door, you can try doing warranty work. I mean, I really don't have a great advice for you to tell you, you know, how to get into these restaurants. I've just been lucky, and I try to maintain those customers once I get in the door. So I had a question right at the beginning of the stream. I didn't write the guy's name down, but he was asking, is it safe and or okay to only have one set of refrigerant gauges with one set of refrigerant hoses in the truck? And the answer is yes. Okay. There's a huge misconception when we started having these new refrigerants that were using polyester oil, POE oil, because we were changing from mineral oil and alkybenzene oil, and all of a sudden POE oil was becoming popular. But POE oil, polyester oil, is hydroscopic. It absorbs moisture really easy. That's why it comes in metal cans and not plastic containers. And in the beginning, they were like, you had to have separate sets of gauges for every refrigerant because they didn't want to contaminate the systems that had mineral oil with POE oil. That was a horrible, horrible misconception and over exaggeration. Okay. Yes, you don't want to mix oils in a system, but it's so minimal, it's not a big deal. Okay. Another thing that you need to remember is, with compound gauges and digital gauges, you do not want to leave refrigerant in the hoses. Okay. I know that I was taught in trade school that you had one set of gauges for R22 and you always left R22 in them so you didn't have to purge them. No, that's not true. If you leave R22, especially in compound gauges, but even in digital gauges, it's going to put unneeded stress on the gauge assembly itself. Okay, the compound gauge assembly, it's not good. It'll go out of whack if it had pressure on it constantly. Same thing with the pressure transducer in a digital gauge set. You don't want to leave constant pressure on it all the time. So you need to let all the refrigerant out of your hoses every single time, open your hoses up to atmosphere, and then purge them on every single use. But no, you do not need to have a separate set of gauges for every single refrigerant. Don't stress that. Just make sure you purge your hoses. Of course, if you have a hose full of oil, clean the dang thing out. You know, you don't want to be dumping that in there, but no, you don't need to worry about having a separate set of gauges for everything. It's always good to have a second backup set of gauges in your truck, though. I carry 2 sets of gauges at all times just in case my primary set breaks, but you don't need to have a second set. So, all right. Does my company service any hot site equipment? No, it does not. We only do refrigeration and air conditioning. So, let's see what else we got in here. Change all the fuses, not just the failed. Jason Johnson, that is a great point. Often I forget to point that out. If you have a 3-phase system and you have one blown fuse, you change all 3. You do not just change the one fuse. There could have been unneeded stress on any one of the other fuses on the other side of that, whatever that caused the one fuse to blow. Okay. So always change all 3 fuses or both fuses or whatever. Okay. On a line disconnect or something like that. That is my policy and has always been my policy. And it is what it is. So let's see what else. Have I ever worked on Daikin and or Goodman RTUs? I've worked on a few Goodman ones, but not Daikin. Let's see what else we got in here. Let me see what else. Is there a specific reason that I don't service fryers and grills? I just never wanted to get into that kind of stuff. It's hard enough to control people working with the refrigeration and air conditioning we do. So here in California, I know it's different in other states. I talked to some techs in Texas and stuff like that. It's very common for a restaurant refrigeration company to do refrigeration and air conditioning here in California. The restaurant refrigeration companies typically don't do hot side work. Now, there's some companies that do it all, but it's very common to have one company that does refrigeration and air conditioning and one company that does hot side. What's interesting is I know in Texas, it's common to have one company for refrigeration, one company for air conditioning, and one company for hot side, which I find intriguing. But yeah. All right. Is the old analog gauge safer? I wouldn't say safer. No. But analog gauges are perfectly good to use. So, yeah, I answered that one. Has a belt broke right in front of me on a package unit? No, it has not. So, if I had to reopen my HVAC company, what would I do differently and avoid? I mean, you want me to be honest with you? I wouldn't have employees. I wouldn't get big enough that I had to bring on extra people. And it's not that I don't like my employees, but having employees brings your business to a whole nother level. And when you're a one-man show, you kind of do things the way that you want and things are always done your way. So, you know, in a perfect world, I'd like to make the money that I make with employees, but not have employees. Okay. But I know that's never going to happen. So, see what else. I already answered that one. Are there any training classes for restaurant equipment? I wouldn't say there's any training classes that I can think of. Also, I saw a question in there. Is there any training classes for like hot side equipment? No, I would encourage people to look into like CEFSA, whatever you want to call it, training and stuff like that. But that can be really expensive for the company, but they'll do good at training you. What happens inside a compressor that has grounded out? Have I dissected one yet? Well, the windings, the wax coating on the winding has gone away or something, and the winding's grounded to a metal source in the compressor. I mean, I've taken compressors apart. Yeah. As far as a burnt out compressor or a grounded out compressor, good luck taking that apart because the thing's going to be all covered in black oil. So it's going to be hard to really dissect that. But I mean, you can. I encourage people to cut compressors open. I can't think of any specific training classes, Willie, though, for restaurant equipment in general. I mean, besides like CEFSA. Let's see. Do I see a lot of AXVs, automatic expansion valves? No, I don't see those very often at all. Maybe, you know, once every couple years you might run across a system that has an AXV. It's very uncommon in the restaurant side. Are old compound gauges safe to use for 410A? Thought they needed higher pressure hoses. Well, yeah, but the hose and the gauge is totally separate from itself. The gauges need to be rated for 410A, and your hoses need to be rated for 410A. It'll say on the hoses. Guys, on your refrigerant hoses, there's another misconception too. Your hoses, they should not be lasting you forever. You should be replacing your hoses probably once a year. Okay. I know people just want to change the seals and move on, but just change your hoses about once a year. Get all new hoses and move on. Okay. I've had hoses blow out in front of me that I let last way too long, that got all brittle, and then I tried to use them on 410A when it was 120 degrees outside, and the damn hose just blew up. So yeah, just replace your hoses on a regular basis. They're cheap enough nowadays. So let's see what else we got in here. Igniter Labs for hot side training. Okay. Yeah, I've never heard of Igniter Labs, but I'll definitely write it down and put it on my list of things to look into. So apparently he said a company called Igniter Labs for hot side training. That's interesting. All right, I'm going to write that down. See, love having information on here. So Igniter Labs. Guys, if you haven't already, I already mentioned it, definitely check out the new YouTube channel, HVACR Tools. Great place where myself and my buddies from the HVAC Overtime channel are going to be doing tool reviews. Also, check out the HVAC Overtime YouTube channel if you guys haven't already. I'm going to post a link in here real quick too. Friday evenings, 6:05 p.m. Pacific time. We go live on YouTube on the Overtime channel. Myself, Bill, Joe, and Adam, and we just kind of hang out and talk about the week and what. Sometimes we have guests, sometimes we don't. So definitely go check out both those channels. No, a compressor's never blown in front of me. So let's see what else we got. What's my opinion on the Parker Zoom lock system in refrigeration or commercial HVAC? Eugene. So Parker Sporlan has a new tool called the Zoom Lock Max. Okay. They used to have the Zoom Lock, but that's a whole long story, but they're no longer supporting the Zoom Lock tool. They're doing the new fitting Zoom Lock Max. Okay. That happened about 2 years ago, year and a half ago is when the changeover happened. So Zoom Lock Max is the new fitting. You do have to use a new press tool for it. Okay. New jaws, I should say. And I like it. Okay. It's not something that I use in restaurant stuff all the time. I've done one video with the Zoom Lock Max tool. It was on a walk-in cooler installation, and it wasn't difficult at all. Just a lot of prep goes into it. I don't really have any negative, opinions about it. I mean, again, though, the fittings, they can be expensive, but they can also save you a lot of time. The Zoom Lock Max tool would be amazing in situations where you have to have hot work permits, working in hospitals and things like that, where they don't want you brazing when there's people in the building and stuff like that. The Zoom Lock Max is perfect in a situation like that. So I think it's a great tool. You guys definitely should look into it if you haven't already. Zoom Lock Max by Parker Sporlan. And, but I think it's a great tool. All right. So what else do we have in here? What would I say on DIY home to... I don't know. I can't really read that right now. Okay, so I'm going through that. Do I wear ear protection? Not as much as I should. I've already got hearing loss. Should have worn ear protection more in my career, but I didn't. So I try to as much as possible now, but no, I don't. I'll just say that. As someone thinking of going to trade school, what's something you should know? Todd, just find a good school, man, and just study as hard as you can. Pay attention. Try to find a service company that will let you apprentice with them and maybe go to school at the same time. So that way you can get some hands-on experience and some bookwork experience from the school. I love this trade and I encourage everybody to get involved in it. It's a great trade. So see what else we got in here. Do I still run across 134A in my area? Yeah, occasionally I do. So nothing wrong with brazing. No. Zoom Lock or braze, each situation's differently. I braze majority of the time. But there's been occasions, like there's a job that's coming up that I might use the Zoom Lock Max on because there's going to be a lot of fittings. But it really just depends on the customer too, because sometimes customers say, no, we don't want you using those fittings. We want you brazing everything, so you got to get permission from the customer with some of these big facilities too. Have I used the pipe vise? No, but I believe Adam has the pipe vise. I don't have it though. What else do we have in here? All right, cool. Well, guys, I am going to wrap this one up because I need to go eat dinner. We're going to get this one over a few minutes early. I really appreciate you guys making it in here. Do me a favor, guys. Please go smash the like button. We've got 359 people in here, 250 likes. smash that like button, help out the stream. If you haven't already, please check out my website, hvacrvideos.com. It's just another way that you guys can support the channel. We got merchandise available on there, hats, beanies, sweaters, all that stuff. The large, extra large hats that I'm wearing right now are out of stock at the moment, but they're coming back in stock. And guys, I wanted to point something out. So this hat, I've shown this before. This is it's kind of like a breathable flex fit hat. Okay. I specifically put HVACR on the hat, and I did not put my logo. There's no other logos on this hat. The reason why I did that is because I wanted you guys to be able to buy these hats and wear them at your job and not be advertising my brand. Okay. So instead of putting my logo on here, I just say HVACR. So that way it's not going to potentially conflict with your guys' uniforms. The same thing went for the beanies that I had made too. Same thing, just says HVACR. Now the t-shirts, of course, they have my logo and my slogan on the back. I have a flag shirt and a big picture shirt, but the hats, I wanted to make it to where people can wear these. And it's really cool because I've ran into people out in the field just wearing these hats, you know? So it's really neat. I think I was watching at Brian Orr's event, the HVACR training symposium. I saw people on the event taking pictures and stuff wearing my hats too. So it's really cool and humbling, but please check out the website. I really, really appreciate it. Yeah. And if I missed your question, send me an email at hvacrvideos.com. And we'll go from there. Do I think in the future there will be no brazing? No, there's always going to be a need for brazing. But, you know, tools like the press tools and stuff like that, you know, they do give people, it's just another tool in the arsenal, you know, because there's times that it's going to be easier to press stuff, you know, so it's great. I like all the new stuff that's coming out. So really, really appreciate you guys. We're going to go ahead and cue up the outro music, and we will catch you guys on the next one.